and misses with regards to human rights. Now, Kisumu has had the worst experience when it comes to human rights abuses, even after the promulgation of the new constitution. So let's cross over live to Kevin Ogutu. Ogutu, good morning. Over to you.
Well, a very good morning, Brenda, and quite a warm morning right here in Kisumu. Talking about the 10 years, that's a decade since we promulgated the Constitution 2010. And with regards to human rights, what we have in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution of Kenya 2010, of course we've had hits and misses, and that's why I'm here with human rights lawyer Jacqueline Ngusia, who together will be trying to look at some of the hits and misses that we've had a decade on after the promulgation of the Constitution 2010. Remember, Kisumu and Nyanza region has had the worst kind of publicity whenever we have the election cycles in terms of human rights abuses. But of course, despite that, of course, we've also had a change in attitude and also tact by the police service. We've had what became the famous Baby Pendo inquest, what really brought out the kind of adjustments that we've had when it comes to really ensuring that the human rights are respected. But that and more, I will be engaging Jacqueline Ngusia here. So the first thing that I'll be asking here is, we had that scorecard whereby we had about 60% of Kenyans wanting enforcement of the Constitution, not really amending it. But before we get into that, we've just talked about Kisumu and issues of human rights abuses. So we've had the constitutional commissions like the IPOA coming in. For you as a human rights lawyer, what do you have to say a decade on, ever since we had the Constitution of Kenya 2010? Do you think to a larger extent we've had most hits, or do we have most misses when it comes to really ensuring that we have the human rights being respected in this country?
Okay, thank you so much, Kevin. Yeah, I wish to ask Kenyans to kindly note that the Constitution has brought a lot of changes into the country, and as you have rightly put, 10 years on, Kenyans still insist the implementation of the Constitution is what is required. We have a very progressive Bill of Rights, and if you look at aspects of human rights, it cuts across not just Chapter 4, but other areas. If you look at Article 10 on issues of principles, national and principles of human rights is considered as a key principle. If you look at issues of devolution, devolution is not in Chapter 4, but issues of bringing services to wananchi is a key human rights issue. So when the survey was undertaken and confirmed that 60% of Kenyans feel implementation is key as opposed to amendment, I would tend to agree with that survey, because the issue we have as a country, we have put systems in place. If you look at constitutional commissions, laws have been amended, but the problem we have is with implementation of the Constitution and the law. So I would say hits and misses, we have done more on hits as opposed to misses. For me, I would put it at 60% hits and 40% misses, and the misses would be more on proper implementation of the Constitution and the laws that came into play to give effect to the various constitutional provisions. Thank you.
There's something else that came out of that particular survey. Remember, it was Kenya National Commission on Human Rights together with the other partners like the Amnesty International, I think the Katiba Institute and other organizations, is that only 23% of Kenyans are satisfied. This is quite a very low percentage. Now let's come to the Kisumu story. Yes. What do we have to talk about it when it comes to human rights abuses? Okay,
for Kisumu County, as a commission, we do receive complaints, and ordinarily in any given day, then most number of cases we receive are on labor issues, labor disputes. You find mainly security firms, private security firms. You find industries not paying their workers well. So ordinarily, those are the most cases we receive, and labor relations is a constitutional requirement. So we are hoping that we'll continue working with the stakeholders to ensure that labor rights are enforced. But we've also seen a trend during elections. The gap between labor and civil and political rights goes up. So cases of police brutality during elections is something that we have witnessed in the 2013 election and also in the 2017 elections. And surprisingly, we noted that during the COVID-19 regulations, enforcement of regulations, the numbers were not very high in Kisumu compared to other regions in Western Kenya. That shows that there is a shift in trend. Accountability mechanism put in place, they are not sufficient yet. IPOA, the Internal Affairs Unit have been put in place, institutions such as the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights providing oversight. We are not there yet, but I'm optimistic. With time, things are going to change. Just hearing the president making a pronouncement, asking for forgiveness when police officers used excessive force during the enforcement of regulation is a positive step, and I'm hoping moving forward we are going to have reduced cases of use of force by police officers. Another human rights violation in the region is on the issue of land disputes. I think there is demand for land, so there are so many cases of eviction. We also have the issue of disobedience of court orders. You know, Kisumu is growing, and there's been a lot of demolitions happening around. Some of these demolitions were happening despite the court issuing orders. So I'm really hoping that the government will ensure court orders are obeyed, because when you disobey court orders, then you are not going to have a society.
Okay, and I want to draw your attention to Article 43 of the Constitution, that's the economic and social rights. We have well elaborated. First of all, we are supposed to, every other person is entitled to the highest attainable health standards within our facilities in the country. But above all, we are not supposed to be denied emergency services, healthcare services. But this is something that implementation has been a big issue, because even the private owners of the hospitals, there's issues about the costs and all that. But why do we have such beautiful provisions, and yet when it comes to the enforcement now, it's a big problem? Which way do we now move? Because it looks like when it comes to the provisions, the Constitution, we are okay, but now the implementation is a problem. How do we bridge this gap?
So for me, it would be an issue of strengthening the systems. Yes, we have very beautiful laws, as you've put it. We still have Kenyans being denied emergency medical treatment, and you've seen that on news. Even in Kisumu, you've heard of private hospitals denying emergency treatment. The issue is with enforcement. The agencies responsible for enforcing the law, the Ministry of Health, the establishment of the council within the Health Act needs to be in place so that we can enforce these laws. The moment you have a beautiful law and you cannot enforce, then the law is as good as not having one in existence. So it's just an issue of ensuring accountability for their actions. Hospitals that deny emergency treatment should be held accountable right from there in charge, and in cases of private institutions, the owners of those hospitals. Accountability, accountability, accountability is what I'm asking for.
And lastly, before I hand back to my colleague Brenda, we have constitutional commissions in place. We talk about your commission, that's the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, the IPOA and all that. When it comes to matters of human rights, from where you sit, do you think what we have is enough? Or is there something else that we need to come up with?
Okay, what we have as a constitution, and I have said that before, we have a very robust Bill of Rights. In fact, the best, among the best in Africa. So as a constitutional commission is the issue of strengthening institutions, strengthening the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Like for the Western region, we have one office that covers 11 counties. So if you are to strengthen the Kenya National Commission, the National Gender and Equality Commission, Commission Administrative of Justice, so that they are able to reach to the Wananchi, it will be a better place to be. We would also note from the study that was released yesterday, the most recognized and appreciated provision of the Constitution is on the Bill of Rights. So Kenyans do understand their rights, but the problem is once their rights have been violated, where do they go to? So just strengthening these institutions where Kenyans can come to them for services, and also just working with other stakeholders in the region. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Jacqueline Ngusia, who is a human rights lawyer based in Kisumu. But of course, as she's mentioned, they get reports from, they cover 11 counties right here. I mean, Nyanza region and also the western part of Kenya. And according to the report, we have the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. 60% of Kenyans are wanting, 60% of them still want the Bill of Rights and the Constitution to be enforced, which means that with regards to human rights, this is one area that, of course, a lot of emphasis has been put on. But then above all, this has been an overview of what has been transpiring in this particular region with regards to human rights. Remember, Kisumu, being the center of focus in the Nyanza region, has had whenever we have election cycles. But as you mentioned, we've seen a shifting attitude and also the way of operation of the police officers here, according some respect to the Bill of Rights among the citizens in this country. So that is the mind that we have. Of course, this is a conversation that we will carry forward and also engage other stakeholders so that we can also get to hear what they think of the Constitution of Kenya 10 years on. Back to the studio.
Kevin Ogutu, thank you so much for that. And still on issues to do with the Constitution, and as the country turns 10 years old, as the Constitution actually turns 10 years old, President Uhuru Kenyatta says it is time for Kenyans to head to a referendum and review the current document. The president has warned against being rigid and instead treat the Constitution as a human being that must adjust to emerging reality. This could just mean that a BBI referendum is inevitable.
If our past is constantly at war with our present, we will together lose our future. And the spirit of this Constitution was meant to reconcile our past with the present in order to secure our future. But the crafters of this social contract also told us and reminded us that a constitution was a work in progress. And as such, we were made to adopt it with a promise that in the future, we will make it better. 10 years later, the moment to improve on it, I believe, is now.
So now, at a time of the talks that time is ripe for a constitutional amendment, questions about the full implementation of Kenya's Supreme Law that turns 10 years today. A clause that was best in paper but seemingly impossible to implement is the two-third gender principle. Ibrahim Karanja looks at the gender agenda 10 years on.
By the 27th of August 2015, it was clear that the implementation of a key provision of the 2010 Constitution was still a piped dream. This was the constitutional deadline by which Parliament was supposed to have enacted legislations to have the two-thirds gender principle take effect, a provision that would see leaders play to the gallery. Yet all these efforts would always flop when the rubber met the road at the floor of the House. The 2010 Constitution of Kenya has largely been touted as the most progressive in the region, with the two-thirds gender principle seen as a game-changer. Article 81B on general principles of the electoral systems read that not more than two-thirds of the members of elective or appointive bodies shall be of the same gender. The same is reinforced in Article 27, sub-Article 8 on equality and freedom from discrimination, that reads that the state shall take legislative and other measures to implement the principle that not more than two-thirds of the members of elective or appointive bodies shall be of the same gender. Yet, 10 years after the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, this requirement is far from being met. Attempts to have it enacted in Parliament through the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill of 2011, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill of 2015, and the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill of 2018, popularly known as the Duale Bill, flopped.
I seek your indulgence to allow for the deferment of replying and voting on the second reading.
Let us dispense off with this bill today, Mr. Speaker, and let the 33 come here. If it is defeated by a vote, that is up to them.
At the time these bills were on the floor of the House, President Uhuru Kenyatta would time and again make pronouncements calling on legislators to pass it.
Join me in ensuring the implementation of the two-thirds gender principle that is in our Constitution. It is the minimum acceptable level of representation. It is a measure for now, not tomorrow.
But these public pronouncements remained just that.
But when it comes to the voting, we have never been summoned by our own leader, our political leaders, to tell us, you people must take this direction. That's why I said, let them stop lip service.
Parliament has failed. It does not fail because of any incapacity on its part. It has failed because it doesn't have the will of people in mind.
A failure that has left Kenyans with an unconstitutional parliament. Muturi Kigano is the chairperson of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of the National Assembly.
If it is not evolved, one that is missing, that does not stop Wanjiku from doing her work. She is not disadvantaged.
The fifth schedule of the Constitution states that this particular legislation must have been enacted 5 years after the promulgation of the Constitution. Article 261, sub-article 7 of the Constitution on consequential legislation states that if Parliament fails to enact legislation in accordance with an order under Clause 6B, the Chief Justice shall advise the President to dissolve Parliament, and the President shall dissolve Parliament. When asked about why it had taken long for him to write to the President to dissolve Parliament,
I can't say anything because the matter is in court before me. Do you get? Because if I say anything now, that's not allowed.
But it is our honest belief that the Chief Justice, having taken the oath to uphold the law, will perform his role.
The Kenyan cabinet, though very late, implemented the two-third gender principle. Some semblance of compliance has also been seen in a number of commissions, while extending to the counties where some county executive committees have fully complied.
The Constitution was very prescriptive under Article 177 on what the county assemblies should do so that they can attain the two-thirds gender rule. You will appreciate that we have seen a lot of nominated MCAs.
Some quarters, however, fault the patriarchal nature of the Kenyan society as what derails this principle, with arguments that a constitutional amendment through the BBI would address these shortfalls. Among proposals to the BBI include having opposite gender run for the gubernatorial positions across the 47 counties.
We feel that if the functions of deputy governors in the Constitution, once again, are not very well spelled out, that it will not help in terms of service delivery. It will help in terms of gender balance, and it will be a big tick in terms of gender balance. But in terms of actual delivery of services to Wanjiku, it might not make any impact.
Failure to implement a single provision of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 dwarfs every other progressive effort taken to paint Kenya as a country that upholds the rule of law. The struggle, it appears, is far from over, and one that needs more than lip service, more than public theatrics.
Even if gender parity is going to be achieved, we are also calling on women, as many women as are possible, to get onto the ballot and to go for elective posts.
10 years later, the failure to implement the two-third gender principle hangs on the neck of the Jubilee administration. The will of the people of Kenya 10 years ago slowly subverted, with those mandated to uphold the rule of law comfortably appearing to be in deep slumber. Ibrahim Karanja, KTN News.
All right, now away from the discussion about the Constitution 10 years later on, I'd like us now to focus on matters of COVID-19 here in the country, and of course how Kenyans have been affected economically, how banks have also been affected, and how they're trying to work with Kenyans who have loans to see how they can repay them. And to have this discussion with us is the CEO of Equity Bank, James Mwangi, who's also a member of the Emergency Response Committee on Coronavirus here in the country.